Hello, Code School. It is the second Code School. Hello, coders. Welcome. Welcome to Thursday. Thursday is Code School Day, and what we're doing today is learning HTML forms. This is a very beginner-friendly stream. We are learning HTML forms, and it's for people who are just starting their coding journey. Those who would potentially have gone to evening classes or meetups or boot camps, which unfortunately, due to the current world situation, you can't do that at the moment. So this is my way of providing a piece of teaching material for those who want to learn to code. And today, as I mentioned, we are going to be working on HTML, HTML forms in particular. So if you haven't created a HTML form before, then do stick around. Feel free to ask any questions along the way as well, and I'll be more than happy to answer your questions as I go. Okay, so we're going to go into the code now, which is this button here. This is the code school repository. It's on GitHub. The link is in the chat already. And last time we did Code School, I was teaching the fundamentals really of HTML, hypertext markup language. So you can click into this folder here, and you can see that we created a index.html file here. These streams are also going to be archived on the YouTube channel as well. So if we go to the YouTube channel here, and I'll put that into the chat as well. So this stream should be on the YouTube channel in the coming few days. So you can see the previous one here, Code School Thursdays, teaching HTML and web development, this one just here. Okay, so let's go back to the repository. And in fact, let's go back into the code. So what I'm using, as I've mentioned before, is PHP Storm for this, but you could use any kind of IDE or any kind of editor that you want. You could even use Notepad. These are just creating markup pages, so there isn't anything like PHP or JavaScript that we're playing with at this present time. So if I go into the index.html file, that is the file that we created the other day, or the last code stream. And let's just have a little quick recap. So we have our doc type here. We also have the head element, and in that element we have a title element. And we can also see that we have some attributes in these elements as well. So that's an attribute, that's a href, and we also have a target. So these attributes are within the elements themselves, and the elements are defined by the greater than, less than symbols on either side. Can you see just either side of that? And then you close the element using this symbol, the backslash, like so. Okay, so today we're going to be expanding this quite further on, and we're going to build the HTML form. And typically with HTML forms, you would build perhaps, say, a contact form. But I thought that it would be quite a nice idea to, based on the current climate, build a form that could help people. So a form that you could create and then perhaps print out and then slide into people's doors with perhaps your contact details. So for instance, if you had any elderly neighbors that you want to look after, then something that you can slip through their door with perhaps your contact details. So that's what we're gonna build. Hey Tyrannid, thank you for joining. You're tired of programming. Yeah, it does get a little bit too much sometimes. I hope you're well. Thank you for joining. So I'm going to create a new file in here. We're going to create another HTML file. So we're going to do a new HTML file here, and we're just going to call this. We'll call this contact form. So contact_form.html. And we're going to hit add. Now, the IDE that I'm using, PHP Storm, is automatically going to generate a template for HTML, which we can see here. So we have our doc type, we have our HTML element here, and our language, which is English, EN, so that's the attribute and the attribute's value. Hey, Adam7HB. Thank you very much for joining. Hello. And we have our title tag. In this title tag, I'm going to say, I'm going to put in a title. Let's just say contact me, for instance, with a capital M here. Okay, so where we're going to put the HTML form is within the body elements here, and the reason being that it is, as I mentioned in the previous code school, is that the head elements are kept for the things that are within the head of the document, things like meta, things like links to external scripts and style sheets, all of those kind of things that we haven't touched on yet, so don't worry too much. Just know that anything that is presented to the page needs to go into the body tags like so. Hey, Beachcasts! Hey, thank you very much for joining. Tyrannid's saying that he's had a fine, busy day and just popped in to say hello. Thank you very much for popping in, Tyrannid. I do appreciate that. Okay, so I have a nice cup of tea here and some water. Even though it's a Thursday, I'm usually drinking something slightly stronger, but I thought a cup of tea would be good for this. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to define our form. Okay, so we want to create a form, and we use a form tag to define that. A really good resource that I will be dipping in and out of, and I'll show you or provide, is if we go over to here, there's the Mozilla MDN web docs. So what I'll do is I'll put that into the chat, and I'll paste that in here. There you go. So if I make this a little bit bigger, what we can see here is the form itself. So we have the form tag, and then we have these attributes. So we have an action, we have a method, and in this case we have a class as well. And then we have a div element. Now we haven't touched on div elements yet. I will be doing that probably in another stream where I'm talking about the layout of HTML. And we've got here a label, and we have an input. So there's a few elements, new elements that we're going to be playing with today. Let's just create ourselves a form tag first, and I'll explain the certain attributes that you need for that. So we're going to go back over to the code in here, and as I said, in the body tag, we're going to create a form. And can you see, using PHP Storm, I'm able to have it highlight certain things that it thinks that I'm going to do. So in this case, we're going to do form, like so. I'm going to just create the element like this. So we have our form start tag, and we have a form end tag, like so. Now, the magic comes with the attributes that we have to provide. There are two main types of forms. There is a form that does a post request, and there is a form that does a get request. So when you're posting values to a form, when you're submitting values, that's usually a post request. You're posting data to the form, and then that goes and gets handled. It could be handled in a PHP kind of way, or it could be done through JavaScript. We haven't really got onto that yet. That's a bit more advanced for what we're going to be playing with today. But you do that you define that as a method. So the method is either a get or it's a post. And then you also provide an action. So this is the action that is performed when the form is submitted. So we define all of these as attributes. So if I go into here, and you can see a whole bunch of attributes that are listed, which PHP Storm has listed for me here. The one that I want to play with is method. And as you can see, I have the option either get or post. In this case, we're going to do a post. And we're also going to supply a action like that. Okay, so let's go back to the docs for a minute. So can you see here the action here is blank? Now, I mentioned, I think, in the first code school that with a blank action, it goes back to the current self, the current page. the current thing. Whereas you can actually define a URL in there where the form gets submitted to. Okay, so that's the essence of a form. Now, obviously, there's other attributes that you can put into to here, such as, for instance, a title. You could put in an ID, which is a unique identifier. Of course, you could put in style, and you can also put in classes and other bits and pieces as well. But within the form tag itself is the elements that define the inputs of the form. Now, it's very important from a semantic point of view, and from just a general user point of view, usability point of view, to put all the inputs within the form tags. So don't put inputs outside of form tags. That's essentially what I'm saying here. So let's go and think about what we're going to build as a contact form. And as I mentioned, I think it would be very nice to build a form that you can print out and then provide to perhaps your neighbor to say, you know, this is me, this is my address, this is my contact details, and then please can you fill out your contact details, and then we could do a swapsy, that kind of thing. And then perhaps provide things on the bits and pieces that you would like me to supply if I could get to the shops if you can't. So there's a couple of elements to this, and of course some of those elements are going to be disabled in the sense that it's going to be providing information such as my contact details for you to contact me, and then your contact details and so forth. So, for example, what we're going to do is we're going to create a little list here. I'm going to create a little on the README file here. We're going to do form, and we're going to have let's think about this. I'm literally making this up as I go. So let's do mobile. These are all the inputs that I would like the form to have. So we want a mobile number. We would like to have a first name. We would like to have a surname. So let's do last name. We would like to have house number. And we would like to have address, which I suppose kind of goes into that. Let's just remove house number. Obviously some houses don't have numbers. Some houses have names instead. So we'll do address. And then let's say, for instance, what I need. And then we're going to do my address. So this is the... So let's do, my name, my address, and my mobile number. And let's do your mobile number, your first name, your last name, and your address. This essentially what I would like to do is have a means of a form that has all of this. So it has your mobile number, your first name, your last name, and your address, and then it has my name, my address, and my mobile number, as well as a box for what I need. This means that you can create a bunch of elements here which are disabled that have the values already set, and then you have enabled inputs here where you can fill that out. Again, I'm probably thinking that this is perhaps something that you print out and then you can slip through someone's door, and then because it's got your address on it and your mobile number on it, then they could either call you up or they could fill out the form and put it through your letterbox. And that way you then have communication between your neighbor, which is great, which is something that is very important at the moment, especially if you have an elderly neighbor and, for instance, they put down that they need to get medicine or something like that, and they provide their mobile details. Then you could call them up and say, okay, I'm able to do that, or I can't do that, or I'm off to the shops, would you like something, that kind of thing. Anyway. Okay, so we're going to create 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 inputs. So, okay. So let's put in... Where's it gone? on here. So we need to have 8 inputs, and therefore we need to we need to have a section for my details and a section for your details as well. So we're going to create as I've done before, we're going to create we're going to create labels for these things. That's what we're going to do. That was the word I was trying to look for. We're going to create some labels. So a label is the visual display, I suppose, of the input. So you can give it a label or some text to say that this input is a first name. This input is a last name. So the first thing we need here is your mobile number. In fact, what I'm going to do is just turn this around, actually. I would prefer it to be my details and then your details afterwards. Sorry, I am jumping to and fro here. So, okay, let's start wiring this up here. So the first thing we need to do is a label. And we're going to have the label here, which says my name. So my name, like that. And then we're going to have an input. Now I'm going to keep this nice and bland at the moment, and I'll go through the attributes in just a second. So we have the input here. Now the input is a self-closing tag. Now that means that you can do that, which means that it closes itself. If you see all these elements, they have the closing element. The closing tag, sorry. So for example, that's the closing tag of the form. This is the closing symbol. So this is a self-closing element. Notice that my IDE here is has this highlight going on here, and this is because it's saying that it's missing some associated labels and other inputs, other attributes that which we are going to supply. So what I'm going to do is just go over to this this one here, and we're going to click on label. I'll explain what a label does first. So it says here, the label element represents a caption. So when I said display piece, that's what I meant, a caption for an item in the user interface. And we use a attribute called for. So for cheese. And can you see that we have the name and the ID of cheese as well? The ID is it's a unique identifier. So it's saying that you should only have one input with the ID of cheese, essentially. And then that's how it gets linked up. So the for links up to that input here. So what we're going to do is we're going to create this input as my name. Okay, so we're going to have a name, and I'll explain more about what the name means in just a second. So this is going to be my underscore name. And we're also going to have, we'll do an ID. We'll do an ID. So my underscore name again. And we also need to have a type. Now this defines the type of the input. In this case, it's going to be text. Okay, so this is a text box. Excuse me. So if we do type, and then we do text, that will give us our text input. Now notice again, this is still highlighting here. It's because it's missing the associated label. So if we were to click on this thing here, we can see a label for my name. So you can see that this is associating itself with this input. So what I'm going to do, because the PHP Storm has added that in, I'm just going to copy this, put this in there, and then I'm going to delete that like so. There we go, and tidy that up. Okay, so we have our label and we have our input. So that becomes a text box. And I think what I'll do at this stage is I will load it up so I can see it. So there we go. If I make that a little bit bigger. So we've got our label like so, and you can see that that is the text box. And certain browsers handle these inputs slightly differently. I'm running off of Chrome here, but I know that in Safari things start acting a little bit differently, especially with certain inputs such as select boxes. They're displayed slightly differently. So you can't really have a style for all browsers, basically. That's what I'm trying to say, is that there are some compatibility issues. It's certainly not as bad as it used to be. Definitely not by a long country mile. Back in the day of the IE6, Internet Explorer 6, even further than that, you got the Netscapes and all of that jazz. That was quite a headache. So now there is a higher level of conformity, but there are still subtle differences between how certain browsers render the inputs. Anyway, this is the label, and then this is the input itself. Now I can type into this input, and I can pass in an alphanumeric string, which is text like this, letters, and then numbers, and also symbols like that. There's nothing to prevent anything else from going in, which is fine. That's exactly what we want. Now, what we don't want, of course, is we don't want this to be actually used. We want this to be deactivated. We want this to be disabled, because this is the person's name. This is your name, right? My name. So we need to disable this input somehow, and we also need to supply a value to this input. And we can do this by going into here and actually putting in the attribute of value. So value, and we're going to put in my name, right? So Peter Fisher. So let's save that and go back into the browser, refreshing this page. We can see that we have that value already submitted. So when you hear the word sticky form, this usually means that when the form is submitted, its values that have been submitted are then sent back to the form. So for example, if you had an error on your form and you had several inputs, you would like to have the other inputs that are valid sticky. Okay, so this is how you would set the value of that input. Now, the thing is with this, it's still enabled, which means that I can still change it. Okay, and we don't want to do that. I can delete the whole thing. If I was to refresh, we go back. So we want to disable this input, and we do this through another attribute, which is disabled. We press enter like so. Now, if I was to press save and refresh here, we can see, I don't know if you just saw that, it just went subtly gray. Okay, so it went subtly gray, and I cannot click into here now. So it is totally disabled. It's totally disabled. And if I was to re-enable it again, if we went back into here, if I was to remove disabled and then hit save, refresh, we can now get into it. Can you see that this goes like a funky blue border, which means that's called on focus. So when you are when you're focusing on a particular input, and I'll explain this more when we actually have other inputs, because it's probably easier to explain when there's more than one input. But this is on focus. So this is focusing that. And then when you come out of it, it's called blur, on blur. So, okay, let's, whoops, sorry, not that one. Let's go back to, no, I've lost me tabs. Okay, so let's go back to here. Now let's put that back in. So I'm going to press Control Z to put that in. Notice though that this doesn't have a value. This doesn't have a value at all. This is still an attribute, but it doesn't have a value. The value is itself. It is disabled. It is essentially a Boolean. It is disabled. There's no need to have disabled equals true or disabled equals false. It is disabled. You either have it or you don't have it. I should mention that all of these things, all of these elements, all of these attributes, all of these values, all of these things to do with data here, these can all be manipulated through JavaScript, and that is something that we will be doing in the future. So, for example, if you wanted to have a button that changed which allowed this to be enabled or disabled depending on the toggle of the button, then you could do that as well. Okay, so let's go back to the README here, and let's have a look. The next one we need to have is the address. Now, the address is slightly different, because if I was to say, copy this, for instance, and paste it underneath, right? So we have, say, my address. And one thing before I push on is notice here on the IDE, we have a red underline here. This is, as I mentioned, this is an ID. An ID is supposed to be unique, and therefore my IDE, the IDE being the PHP Storm, the editor here, has noticed that there is two elements that have the same ID. The names can be the same, sure, but the IDs can't, and therefore that's red. So we need to change all this. So we're going to do my address, like so, my underscore address, if I can find the right keys on the keyboard, my address, and I'm going to just copy that across to the ID here, like so. And let's keep it as a type of text, that's fine. But let's just put in a blank value, right, and not disabled. Let's hit save and go back to here. Okay, so notice I haven't added a label, right? So it's just wrapped around like so. This one is enabled, this one is not. The thing is, an address isn't just a single line, okay? An address isn't just a single line of text. It's actually an area of text. It is therefore a text area. Now this, I must admit, when I first started learning HTML code, this baffled me because this is an input that is very different from the other inputs, from other text. Why the input type isn't just a text area, I don't know. Other people better than me will probably know. So this is actually a completely different element. It's not even an input. It is a text area element. And you do this like so, text area, all one word, text area. Again, you have the name, you have the ID, you don't have the type, you don't have the value. It can be broken, like so. I mean, you can have a value if you want, but because this is going to be empty, and then you can close it like you certain browsers won't allow you to close this. Okay, so if I clicked on expand tag, now as I mentioned, this baffled me when I first started learning to code those many years ago, because this element, this text area element, doesn't look anything like an input, and yet it kind of it is. Okay, so what I'm going to do is well, first of all, let's just save that and then refresh, and then I'll put in the label. So if I refresh this, you can see that it's changed. We now have this big block like so, and you can see that there is this arrow, this weird arrow on the right-hand bottom corner there. If I was to grab that and drag it, I can make this text area as big or as small as I want. But be careful, because as you've just witnessed, it can change the layout of the screen. Okay, so let me just refresh this, and let's go back to the form and put in our label. So again, I'm going to hover over to this and go associate a new label with the text area element, and we're going to do that. So this is my address, and we're going to press enter, and then we're going to open this up, refresh the page again, and you can see that we have my address like so. Now, obviously, I haven't done any kind of styling at all with this. We're just putting elements on the page, so it's going to wrap around. It should actually be like this, but because I've gone and maximized the screen, it's not behaving as it should do. So let's just keep it like that for a minute, and just make that block like so. And just to explain a little bit about the layout, this is how, if I go back to here, we can see that we have these within div tags. So this is constructing the element blocks, the div blocks, which is more on that I'll talk about later in future streams perhaps. Okay. All right, so let's go back to the README file. What's the next thing we need to do? We need to do my mobile. Oh, sorry. No, what we do need to do, is we need to fill out my address. There we go. So let's do that. So in here, we actually put in the text, right? Not in the value, in here. So let's just do something like, I don't know, how to code well street, and then comma or yeah, comma, and then London, and then comma UK, right? Just making that up. There isn't a 1 How to Code Well street. I don't own a street. I don't think I would want to. Let's hit save. Whoops. And then refresh. There we go. Can you see that we have 1 How to Code Well street? Notice that we have a load of white space here. So you've got to be cautious when you're populating these forms. The white space is basically a replica of what we put in here. So it's often easier to do things like this. Okay, so there we go. And then we should have London like this. So we're going to unfortunately move it all over here. Whoops, come on, PHP Storm. There we go. Hit save and then refresh. There we go. That should now be like so. Now this, I'm having to adjust the height and the width of this. By default, this is what we have, and obviously it's cutting off the London and the UK parts. So what we could do is we could provide some more attributes to deal with this. So we have this thing called rows, and rows define the amount of rows that we're displaying on the page. And if we can see, we have 1, we've got 2, and we've got 3 rows. So let's do 5 rows. Let's hit save and let's refresh. You can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. So yeah, let's knock that down to 4. There we go. Excellent. Excellent. Okay, brilliant stuff. And again, let's disable this as well. There we go. So I can't work in here now, and I can't click into there either. Okay, good stuff. Good stuff. Okay, the next thing we're going to motor on and deal with, which is the mobile number. So again, we're going to need a label. So we're going to copy this label and we're going to paste it down here like so. This is going to be my _ mobile, and this is going to be my mobile. And notice that PHP Storm has highlighted this as red. This is because there isn't any kind of input for this particular label yet. And this label is going to be an input type of text, like so. If I paste it in. So this is my mobile. And we'll make up a mobile number. So we'll do 0800 1, 2, 3, 4, or something like that, whatever. I mean, that's not even a correct number, but let's refresh here and we can see that we have my mobile number, and again that's all blanked out, so I can't adjust it at all. Okay, so that is that. What I'm going to do though is go over to the next thing, and that is what I need. Now this is going to be I think this should be a series of checkboxes, and I think that, I mean, this really does need to come down to this point, doesn't it? Really. So I think this is going to be a series of checkboxes. So we can have medicine, we could have shopping, we could have a phone call, that kind of thing. You know, a selection. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is move on to the next thing here, and this is the section where you can actually fill out details, so your mobile number, your first name, your last name, your address, and so forth. So I'm going to grab, go back to the code here, sorry, let's go over here. Let's just make this a little bit, can I make this a bit bigger? There we go, make it a little bit bigger. All good. So the first thing I'm going to do is, it is your mobile number. That's the first thing. In fact, I'm going to just change this to be your name, okay? So instead of your first name, your last name, let's make it nice and simple, as minimalistic as possible. So your name and your mobile number. There we go. So the first thing is your name and then your mobile number. So what we could do is we could copy this, my name, and we're going to put this down here, and we're going to have your name like so, and we're going to have your underscore name as the 4, the value of the 4. We're going to have that as the name, and we're going to have that as the ID. And we're going to allow people to enter this, so we're going to not have it disabled. Let's hit save. Let's refresh. We have your name. Now this, I do admit, this is getting a little bit messy. I can click into here and I can fill this out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint all of the inputs on the page, and then I'm going to tidy it up. Okay. So we're going to have, so label your name, and then the next one here is label your mobile. I mean, I'm making an assumption here that people have mobiles, but it could be landlines. I could just put in your phone number. So your mobile, I've capitalized that. We'll leave it as text for now. It's not actually supposed to be text, but I will come back to that in just a second. Let's just get things on the page first before we worry about those particular attributes. So this isn't text. This is a number, essentially. Okay, so that's the mobile. What was the last one? I couldn't remember. Oh yes, your address. So again, this is going to be a text area. So we're going to grab that, and we're going to paste it in here like so. So label, and this is going to be your address. And that's the ID. This is your address. It's not going to be disabled. We are going to have it as 4 rows, and we're not going to have any values. So we're going to remove that. And what we can do is just bring that over to the end there. Let's just get rid of that white space. Okay, let's hit save, a refresh, and then that's another element on the screen. We can see that. Can you see this is what I meant by the focus? When you're clicking onto a particular input and you can see that it's highlighted, that means that it has focus. Okay, so let's go back to the code. The last one I said was going to be a series of checkboxes. Now, checkboxes are they're an interesting type of input because you can have more than one, or you could just have one. So, for example, a checkbox, it could be if you were to tick or untick if you accept the terms of service, that kind of thing. Or it could be a series of checkboxes that we're going to do here to allow for multiple options. This is different from radio buttons because a radio button is you can only have one of the selection of radio buttons, whereas a checkbox you can have multiples. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is tidy this up first before I venture into checkboxes, just because I know that there are multiple ones of them. So, but we're going to take a step back and we're going to have a look at the semantics of this. What we're going to do is probably use some field sets to tidy this up. If I go over to the browser here and go into here, if I scroll down here, we can see a field set. Okay, so let's click on this. So a HTML field set element is used to group several controls as well as labels within a web form. So if I scroll down here, you can see that we have a field set. So this is a particular element here, and this has a legend, okay, and we then have our inputs and our particular labels. Now, this is also using a BR element, which is for a breaking row, so we can have some space as well. Let's see if we don't have to use that. I might have to use that in a bit, but essentially what we've got here is this sort of box that goes around. Oh, by the way, these are radio. This is what I meant by radio buttons. We have this gray box that goes around here, okay, and then we have our legend, which is this sort of title. So this kind of works quite well for what we want to do here, because we have two areas of this form. We have my details and we have your details. So let's go into the browser here, here. So we want to put this, so all the my bits, all of this stuff in one field set, and we want to put all of this in another field set. So let's go to the code, which is that tab over there. So essentially it's this, and then it's this, okay? So let's say, for example, we want to have a field set, so field set, and I'm going to put those elements, or these elements within that. So let's put that in like so. I'm going to hit the magic, some magic keys just to format the screen here. That was for anyone using PHP Storm. This is Command. It was Shift Alt and then L, and with the rearrange code and code cleanup selected. And what that did is it just made sure that the indentation was correct. Made sense. Okay, so that's the first field set. And if I was to go over to the browser again, refresh this page, we can see that this is now within this border, which is excellent. So the next thing we're going to do is, again, we're going to do a field set for the bottom one. So we're going to do a field set here. And can you see that we have these two elements on the same indentation? And then we're going to close this field set underneath. And notice that the IDE here, the PHP Storm, has marked this as red. You can see that little red underline there. It's because it's missing. Element field set is not closed. So let's go ahead and close that like so. Again, I'm going to put in the magic tidy up just to indent these correctly. We can get rid of that blank line there. No problem. Okay, let's hit save, go back to here. We should now, once I do the refresh of this page, we should see that this is has a gray border amongst these things. So let's go and refresh, and yes, we can. Excellent. So let's go and have a little play with the legends. So if I went over to here, we can see that we can create some legends like this. So we have a legend. Choose your favorite monster. So in this case, what we're going to do is your details and my details. So again, if we go over to the code, and it was an element, wasn't it? It was refreshing my memory here. Yes, it is a particular element. So let's go over to here. Now it's worth noting that you don't have to have a field set and you don't have to have a legend for the form to submit. These aren't required elements. So let's do a legend like so. And we're going to have my details, and we're going to copy that, and we're going to paste it in here, like here. And this is your details. And I've just realized this needs to be your mobile rather than. Hang on a minute. Yeah. Oh, I'm missing something here. My details, my name, my address. I've gone and. Silly me. This needs to be in the other section. Beg your pardon. So let's put that in. There we go. So we have the name, we have the label. We have the name, my name, my address, and then my mobile. I'm actually going to tidy this up. I think the mobile needs to go above the address. That should be like this. There we go. And let's have a look and just see the other one. So we have your name, yes, we have the mobile, and then your address. So let's save this, go back into the browser here, and refresh the page. Can you see that we have the legend, my details and your details? Let's just bring this up a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is make these go on to a single line. I think that's something that I'm going to do. Just so it's easier to look at. Can you just bear with me a second? My mobile is firing off. I just want to make sure that everything's okay. Yeah, fine. Sorry, when my phone goes nuts like that, it's I get a little bit apprehensive. It's like, Pete, you're on fire or something. Right, in a bad way. So okay, so we're gonna put these down as new lines. So I'm just gonna grab some a drink. My tea has probably gone very cold. It's green tea, by the way, that I'm on, in case anybody Care to know? Okay, so if I go back over to here, we can see that we have we can see that we have a BR. So we have a breaking row, and we can also see that if I went back to the other place, which was it in input or was it in label? No, it was in label, I think it was. We had these within divs. So these are layout elements, and because of the nature of how these are defined, these are a single block on the page, and I will talk more about what that means when we get to the CSS side of this. These code schools, but essentially we've got some options. We could create some wrap it around div tags, or what we could do is create some BRs to create breaking rows. So what we could do is, I think for now, what we're going to do is put them in divs, because divs are a nice way to group these elements. So let's do a div, and let's do a div like so. Oops, I need to do that. Sorry, after the legend. There we go. And let's do another div like this. And we'll close that, and we'll open up another one, and we'll close that, and I'll do the magic cleanup of the code, and you can see that now it's all indented nicely. So we have our divs like so. So this allows us to put in a container around these inputs. Now when we go about styling this is important, because this becomes the parent container element for both the label and the particular input as well. Okay, so that really needs to go like that, really, to be honest. So let's hit save. Let's refresh the page. Okay, so by default, and this is something that I wasn't necessarily going to talk about today, because this is now moving on to the styling. But by default, a div will have will be displayed as a block being, in this case, full width, which means that it goes across the page. I can probably, can I highlight these things? Yeah. You might subtly be able to see a little line there, and a little line sort of here across the section. This is the div, and it's forcing the child elements to be within this particular block. So let's go ahead and do the same thing for the other section here. So below the legend, we're going to have just a div. Like so. And oops, sorry, let's put in a div here. And then we've got to have another one like this. div. There we go. And another one here, just checking on the time, because these streams are only supposed to be for an hour. But I might have to go over, which is fine. I'm more than happy to do that. So let's refresh here. Okay, so can you see that now everything is lined up as expected? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this form. Okay, so we have the first name, we have the name, we have the mobile, and we have the address. At the moment, we are just using text boxes and a text area, but we're actually going to change this to be a number rather than because if this came back to you with ASFFDS blah 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 in the number, then that's not good, is it? So there is a way to get around this. There is a particular attribute, a value for the type. If I was to go into here, and let's see now, where am I? It's here. So where we've got type, we can put in number. Let's hit save. So this is the element for that input. Okay, so your mobile, that is a number. Let's hit save. Let's go over to here. sorry, here, there we go. Refresh. Now there isn't any visual change, but if you looked at this, you can see that there is a way of incrementing it. I can't put in any letters, but I can put in numbers, which is exactly what we wanted. It's exactly what we wanted. Which is great. So we're changing the way the input values are defined based on the type that we are requiring. Okay, and I suppose what we should do for belt and braces is to change the one above here. Even though it's disabled, we should change this as well to be number to make sure it is correct, like so. Okay, excellent. All right, so we're going to move on to the check boxes now. So this is going to be this section here. So what you need. So I'm going to go over to the browser and I'm going to open this up and we're going to scroll. There should be in here checkboxes. If not, I'll just do it. HTML elements. Code. No. Okay. So you could have, here we go, checkbox as the type, which turns it into this. This is a very good piece of documentation here because it shows you the examples, which is very, very handy. This is on the link that I put onto the into the chat here. We've just done a number. If I scroll down here, that's the number, and you can actually try this out for yourself on here. But you can also have month. You could even have image, password. Password is pretty cool because it puts dots for your characters. This is a radio, so you can tick and untick. Well, you can tick that, but you can only untick it if you select another one. But the difference between a radio here and a checkbox is that you can tick and untick this, like an acknowledgement of accepting terms, that kind of thing. Other things is date as well, so you can define dates, which is pretty useful. There's loads. File is another good one as well, so you can choose a file to upload if you want. So using the input type, you can change how these inputs are actually used and their required values. So this is very good. It also has obsolete values as well, which is very handy. So this is a very handy piece of documentation. So what we're going to do is a checkbox like so. Let's just click on there. Can I see some more bits and pieces about that? Yes, I can. Excellent. So we can see here that we have a checkbox. We have one checkbox there and we have another checkbox there. Can you see that we have two names, so horns and scales? So that is the option, and I can click these kind of things. So we would have, for instance, we would have medicine, we would have food supplies, we would have perhaps a phone call, that kind of thing. They could either check all three, or they could check one, or they could just not check any at all if they don't want to. So let's just go over to the code and start filling this out. So down here, what I'm going to do is create another div to start off with. And in here, we're going to have a label, and in the label, like here, notice the label is after the input. Okay, not before, it's after the input. So you have your input there, and then you have the label. So we're going to have a label here, and we're going to say that this is food supplies. And we're going to have another label here, and this is going to be medicine. Or meds, and then we're going to have another one for phone call, or just a chat, or a phone call. That would be nice. A phone call. Okay, so let's go ahead and fill out these inputs. So these inputs are much the same as we've done before, but they have a specific type of checkbox. So what I could do is I could copy this, for instance, and then I could put that in down here, and then down here, and then down here, like so. So this is going to be, the ID is going to be food underscore supplies. The ID here is going to be meds. The ID here is going to be phone call. Okay, so we're going to copy these values over to the names, and then we're going to copy the phone call over to there too. Okay, so the type is going to be a checkbox. Now we're not going to supply a value, so I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste this up to here, like this. And oops, sorry. That's one too many, isn't it? There we go. And then like so, like this. Okay. So missing associated label. So, oh, sorry. Yes, I need to have a 4, don't I? 4 equals food supplies. And then this one is 4 equals meds. And then this one here is 4 phone call, isn't it? Phone call. Okay. So these are the things that you may want to offer as a service to your neighbor. So let's hit save. Let's refresh this particular page and see how it's displayed. So you have your checkboxes lined up nicely like so. Now what you could do if you really wanted to is you could create a sub field set within there. So what I could do, for instance, is I could do a field set, and then within this field set I would have a legend. So let's do that like so. And then in here, in the legend itself, I would have what services do you require? I can't spell. I can't spell. There we go. Okay. Now, I probably don't actually need to have the div, to be honest, because that's fine. Let's hit save. Let's refresh here. So you've got what services do you require? Now, notice that it's okay to have that inside, but just be careful. You don't want to have too many nested field sets in. It gets a little bit clunky. But I mean, it's a nice way of breaking up the portions of the form, the grouping elements of the form, I should say. Okay, so we have food supplies, meds, and a phone call. I mean, you could offer other things as well if you wanted to, like if there's any DIY that is needed, although I probably shouldn't recommend that at this time. But it's always nice to offer to go out and get some food supplies or some medicine, or even just a phone call to your elderly neighbors. The idea here is that what you would do is you would fill this all out in, so you would update your details here. You would fill this out. You would then print this off. You would then cut this out, and then you would just hand this over to, or you would post it into other people's letterboxes. That's what I'm trying to, the words are escaping me. You would put them in the letterboxes, and then they would potentially either call you up, or they would fill out this form and then they would post it back. And that's kind of a way of you making contact with your neighbors and seeing if they need anything, which is awesome, which is very good at this time of well, yeah. What we're in at the moment is obviously not an easy thing. Okay. Now, I've talked a lot about cutting this out, printing this out, and actually having this as a piece of paper. But obviously we're working in the world of the web. So you may want to use this as an actual web page that you send people to a link, and then they would fill that out. This would require obviously some form of back end. So they would fill this out, they would press a submit button, and then that would submit the form to somewhere else. This is what we're going to be focusing on in the next and next stream. What I'm going to do though is I am going to just add our input for the particular button. So I'll, because you can't really show how to create a form without actually showing how to do a button. So at the very bottom of here, we're going to create another input, and we're going to have the input type of button. We're also going to have a value, and we're going to have submit, like so. Okay, so let's close that down. We're going to change this to submit. I'll explain what the difference is in a minute. Submit. Okay. So let's hit save, and let's refresh the page. So scroll down here, you can see that there is this submit here. So that is an actual button here. I can press it if I wanted to. And when I do press it, it actually goes back to the top of the page. So this is actually submitting it to itself. Hello, Mr. DB303. You've sparked off the emotes. Thank you very much. Awesome. Thank you very much for following. I do appreciate that. Thank you. All of those lovely emotes flew around. I'm so glad that works. That's brilliant. Yeah, so that is the submit here. And notice my cursor hasn't changed at all. There is no sort of hover state going on here. We would have to adjust all that with styling. Again, this is something that we will get onto, we'll progress onto. This essentially is the basis for a project that we're slowly building. So this will submit it to itself. And I guess what I could do is, if I went to, say, if I was to scroll up to the top here, and where we've got post and where we've got action, so I could change this to be a completely different path, or a completely different page that it gets submitted to. So for example, if I did http://google.com and then hit save, and then refresh this page. Oops, sorry, no. Let's just hit enter. There we go. And then hit submit. That's going to take me to google.com. This is because I'm now submitting this data to another resource, okay? This thing that's going to handle this form submission. As you can see here, the requested post is inappropriate for Google, because Google doesn't work like that, of course. So let's go back here. I can change this, of course, to be a get method instead of a post method. Now, obviously, this completely defuncts the whole nature of this form, because we're doing a get request rather than a post request. We will be talking about those particular requests in more detail when we get to talking about HTTP in more depth. But this is a different type of request. This is now getting something rather than posting something back. So we're not posting the form data anymore. We are getting something. So let's hit save, and then let's refresh this page. Okay, and let's hit submit. Now this is actually going to load up Google, because now we've changed our request to be a get rather than a post. So we're not submitting anything to Google. If we were to submit something on here, for instance, I mean, this is essentially a form, right? Then that would be perhaps, I don't know how they've done it with Google, but that would perhaps be a post request. And they obviously changed the query string above here. Actually, this is quite interesting. I don't know if you can see, but right at the top here, we have question mark equals your name, and then we have and then we have your mobile, and then we have and or ampersand, and then your address. If I was to actually submit something in here, so let's say, for example, if I went to the page, if I click back, there we go. If I put in my name, or your name is, let's say, Jack, and my mobile number was 1234, and my address was Foo Bar Street, and I wanted to have food supplies, meds, and a phone call. Let's hit submit. What we've got here on the address is we have a query string. Now, this query string is made by the form that was submitted. So we have question mark, That is the start of the query string. And then we have your name. So remember, your underscore name is the name of the form element that we have submitted. So your underscore name is equal to Jack, and, which is an ampersand, your underscore mobile is equal to 1234, and your underscore address is equal to foo plus bar plus street. Now, the pluses in a query string are spaces in this sense. Okay, and then another ampersand, food underscore supplies equals on, and meds equals on, and phone call equals on. So that is our query string that was created by, what I'm going to do actually, because it's very difficult to read, I'm going to copy this and I'm going to put this into here as a comment. Now, I haven't actually talked about comments in HTML, but so that's it. That is our, whoops. There we go. So that is our query string. I'll break it up. Okay, so we have https google.com. Okay, so even though that was HTTP, it's now forwarded up to HTTPS, but whatever, that's by the by. Then we have a query string. Okay, so let's just tab this out. And we have your underscore name. That your underscore name is this, your underscore name. Okay, sorry, this, your underscore name, this name here, this name section. All right, so your underscore name, and then we have an ampersand, okay, and then we have your underscore mobile. So what I'm going to do is just tab this out a little bit, make it a little bit more readable, and then so let's put an ampersand on that side, and your address is equal to this, and your food supplies is equal to that. So that here is the query string that we have supplied to Google using this form. Okay, if we change this to be a post request, then we won't be putting this in a query string. We would actually be posting the submitted values for it to be processed. So for instance, this could be a PHP file that picks up the posted data, the posted request, and then processes those values and does things, saves things to the database perhaps, or what have you. So we're 6 minutes over. I hope that was helpful. I will be putting this on the How to Code Well Live YouTube channel, not the main one, but the How to Code Well Live YouTube channel in the coming days. Before I go, I should mention that there'll be a podcast tomorrow. There hasn't been one for a few weeks, but I'll explain why in the podcast tomorrow. And tomorrow we're going to be talking about DevOps, some technology that I'm playing with at the moment, which is Ansible and Terraform. So if you're into DevOps, if you're into building servers and infrastructure, if you're into AWS, then do check that out. If I put that into the comments below, so let's do. Its command is podcast, like so. There we go. So that should come through, podcast, hopefully. If not, I'll just put in the... It's not coming through, is it? Oh, dear. There we go. Come on, Nightbot. There we go. Listen to the podcast. howtocodewell.fm. Nightbot got there in the end. So there we go. Happy coding, everybody. Thank you ever so much for joining. It's been great. And we'll do another Code School next Thursday at 9 o'clock GMT, same as today. But for now, thank you ever so much for watching. Happy coding, everybody. Have a good rest of your evening. Stay safe, stay healthy. Take care. Cheers. Bye.